I still remember the screams, Mom's cries reverberating through the house, echoing through the empty halls for all to hear. That night in July of 1981 will be seared into my mind forever, because that's the night my brother was taken. I don't remember much about David, if I'm being completely honest. I remember that he was outgoing, his favorite color was blue, and he liked race cars, but that's about it. I was only 6 when he was taken. I do, unfortunately, remember the abduction. Dad had called us kids in for supper just as the sun was beginning to set. I can still recall it vividly. I was so hungry that I could eat a horse, and naturally, I was the first inside. David lagged behind to gather up his marble collection that we'd been playing with. He had just managed to cross the street and he was mere feet away from our driveway when it happened. A white panel van screeched to a halt directly behind him. The door was flung open and 2 men wearing all black leapt out. They grabbed my older brother by the arms and violently tossed him into the vehicle before slamming the door shut and peeling away. I will never forget the look in David's eyes. Pure, undebated terror flooded his pupils. He didn't fight back. He never had the chance to. It happened in the blink of an eye before David could begin to process what was happening to him. Of course, my brother was never found, despite having an accurate description of the getaway vehicle and the assistant's clothing. The police couldn't point a suspect. Not one. We lived in a town of 3,000 fucking people and they couldn't zero in one damn person. I'm sorry, I lost my cool. All these decades later and my blood still boils when I think about the lack of effort that was displayed in my brother's case. But I digress. As the years ticked past, we began to lose hope that David would ever be found. That was the worst part, not knowing. As cruel as it sounds, if the police were to find a body, then at least we would have some sort of closure. But they never did. We were left in a state of constant wonder. Where was David? Who was holding him captive? Was he suffering? And the question that gnawed at my brain, the one that really burrowed into my psyche for years upon years, if David ever was found alive, would he even remember us? After decades of zero progress in the investigation, we had all come to terms with the fact that David wasn't ever going to turn up, that he was just a memory. Well, all of us except Mom. Bless her. Mom held out hope until the day she died. My heart shattered for her, and it still does. She lived 37 years without ever finding out what happened to her baby boy. 37 agonizing years wondering if she would ever get to hold him in her arms someday, to see him smile, to tell him how much she loved him. But that day never came. After Mom passed, we had no one left who still believed that David was still out there. So when we received a knock on the door over Thanksgiving dinner, David was the last person anyone expected to find standing on our front porch. "Time to say grace. Whose turn is it?" Carrie asked, surveying the room. There were 5 of us in attendance that year. My sister Carrie, her husband Derek, Dad, me, and my daughter Lauren. We'd scale it back to just immediate family after Mom's passing. It was a more solemn occasion without her there. "I'll do it," Lauren enthusiastically proclaimed, clasping her hands together and squeezing her eyes shut. We all mirrored her and bowed down our heads. "Dear Heavenly Father, please bless this food and everyone here with us." 3 distant knocks resounded through the dining room, cutting Lauren off. Her brows furrowed as she turned to me. We all stared at each other anxiously in silent anticipation. And then we heard it again. I got it. Whoever's out there is gonna get a piece of my mind for interrupting dinner like this. Dad seethed, groaning as he tried to stand up from his chair. No, Dad, sit back down. I'll get it. The last thing we need is you busting a hip on your way to give our visitor an earful, I said, rising from my seat. Dad grumbled under his breath as he reluctantly settled back into his chair. Once I'd nearly reached the door, the knocking assaulted our eardrums yet again. Okay, geez, I'm coming, I muttered as I turned the knob. When the door swung open, my face contorted in confusion. A man wearing a beige overcoat stood before me. His brown hair was sprinkled with grays, and his hazel eyes looked as dull as if all the joy and fulfillment had been snuffed out of them some time ago. I didn't recognize the man I was looking at. Hi, can I help you? A single tear trickled down his face, a spark of recognition igniting his features. Yes, you can. Tim, it's me, David. David who? I replied, still struggling to connect the dots. I'm David Monahan, your older brother. My heart exploded and my mind collapsed in on itself. I began to go numb and grabbed the doorframe for support. The man, claiming to be my brother, wrapped his arms around me, gripping me in a tight hug. Tim, it's so good to see you again. You have no idea how much I've missed you. I couldn't move. My brain was failing to process the information I had received. It was all too much. My brother, the man my family had mourned, the one we thought was dead for decades, was clinging to me at that very moment. Hey Tim, who's at the door? Dad shouted from the table. David released me and regained his composure. Look, I know this is overwhelming, but do you mind if I come in? I nodded, my head still spinning. Yeah, everyone's down the hall. I choked out as I pointed a pallid finger in the direction of the dining room. Thank you, I've been dying to see them. It's been such a long time. I timidly followed behind David as he proceeded to reunite with the rest of the family. I was in complete shock. Questions ricocheted in my brain like ping pong balls. How long has David been free? Who took him? How the hell was any of this possible? Some of the same questions that had plagued me for years flooded back, along with a plethora of new ones. But I'd receive my answers soon enough. The family was chattering away with Lauren, sneaking morsels off her plate when no one was paying attention. The second David and I stepped into the room, everyone fell completely silent. Carrie and Dad looked as if they'd seen a ghost, their faces mirroring my own. I glanced at Dad. Tears began to well in his eyes. David, is it actually you? My older brother smiled warmly back at him, his lip trembling as he replied, Yes, Dad, it's really me. Dad began to sob, tears openly flowing down his cheeks. It felt strange witnessing that. I'd only seen Dad cry once in my life, and it was at Mom's funeral. David rushed over to him, gently resting a hand on his shoulder. I took the opportunity to shuffle over to my daughter and reclaim my seat. I was afraid that I was going to faint if I didn't. Dad, I'm okay. You don't have to cry over me. I'm back now. Everything is alright. Dad continued to sob before he glanced up at David with teary eyes. All those years, all those lost, precious years. I weep not only for what we cannot get back, but for what had been returned to us. David, we've all missed you so incredibly much. I hope you know that. Now, the day that we've been waiting for is finally here. I'm so glad to see you again, son. David's expression suddenly shifted. His warm visage melted into one of disgust. My breath caught in my throat as he reached into his waistband. Adrenaline surged through my veins like venom when I laid eyes upon what he was hiding. David had pointed a stainless steel revolver at my father's skull. Hey, what's going on here? Carrie demanded. Why don't you ask Daddy, dearest? He growled. Unless you already know. In that case, I should end every one of you. David snarled, wildly aiming the firearm at each of us. His eyes were manic, frantically darting around the room. Dad sighed, tears again sliding down his cheeks. David, they have no idea. No one did, not even your mother. Leave them out of this. I'm the one you came for. No, it's too late for that. You need to tell them what you did to me, what you did to our family. Dad shamefully surveyed the room. Carrie was squeezing Derek's hand so hard I thought she'd snap a bone. Lauren was pale as a sheet, hands placed neatly in her lap, and I was on the edge of my seat, mortified. Dad reluctantly answered the question that lingered in the air. Okay, you're right. They deserve to know. He took a moment to compose himself before continuing. When you kids were little, your mother and I, we fell on hard times. She was laid off and I had to take a sharp pay cut to just stay at my own shop. Money was tight and eventually we realized that we were going to lose the house if things kept going the way they were. And your mother, oh, she loved that house. I knew we'd never been able to afford anything like it again. I couldn't just rip out her dream home right from under her like that. So I had to get creative. In the end, I made an agreement with someone to have David go live with them. At least until... David suddenly slapped my father across his face with his free hand. Derek instinctively shot up from his chair, but David shifted the gun to him. Sit down, he barked as Derek hurriedly obeyed. Now you, tell them what you really did. Okay, I'm sorry, Dad squeaked, cowering over the threat of a second slap. I did make an agreement, but not the kind I was leading you to believe. I was paid. Your brother wasn't kidnapped. It was all a front to get us out of debt. I had full control over the joint account, so I told your mother that I got a promotion at work, and she was too distraught to question it. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Dad wailed, covering his face with his hands. His revelation was followed by silence. The only sound was that of Dad's cries echoing throughout the home. Then I watched as Carrie rose from her seat. She marched straight up to Dad and loomed over him. He glanced up at her pathetically. He was mad with a closed fist to the jaw. How could you? You were tight on cash, so you sold my baby brother? What the hell was wrong with you? Did you even stop to think about what that would do to us? I blame myself for such a long time. I never fully recovered from that. And Mom? You seriously thought that Mom would take that stupid rundown dump that you called a house over one of her own children? You're psychotic. It was never about what anyone else wanted. It was always about him, his wants and his needs. And he hated me, David muttered, clenching the handle of his revolver with a wise grip. He never loved me like he did you two. He would have given me away if he had the chance. Me, a child, his own blood. Dad sheepishly gazed up at the two of them. As the reality of our situation sunk in, I began to realize that I felt no sympathy for my father anymore. A cocktail of emotions swirled within me at that moment. Disbelief, betrayal, despair. But at the forefront of them all, rage. Dad had taken my brother away from me and lied to everyone about it. For what? A few dollars? I knew I'd never to be able to look at him the same way again. My father was the devil incarnate. Look, David, I'll make this up to you. I can make things right. No, you can't, and you know that. But I can, and that's exactly what I intend to do. David spat, his eyes burning with resentment. Dad peered down at the slab. He didn't utter a word. He just accepted whatever my brother had in store for him. I solemnly stood for my spot at the table. I knew just as well as Carrie and Dad and David what had to be done. Derek, Lauren, can you two wait outside, please? We need to have a little talk with Dad. Alone. They silently shuffled out the door. Lauren turned back and opened her mouth to speak, but thought better of it. I watched as her blonde curls bounced around the corner and into the hall. Once we heard the front door shut, we all circled in. I won't bore you with the details of our conversation. I will say that David's revolver was feeling very chatty, however. It took a real liking to Dad too. Such a shame they didn't get to meet sooner. I don't feel an inkling of remorse. Why should I? I have enough insurance money now to pay off both Laura and my student loan debt. Plus, there's one less monster roaming the earth. But the best part of all, now that things have quite literally simmered down, I finally have my long-lost brother back. And that's something I wouldn't trade for the world.